There are lives that make history, and then there are lives that quietly make eternity. Pope Francis never chased greatness, he simply walked with God, humbly, faithfully, one step at a time, and yet the world followed. Not because he demanded attention, but because he carried something deeper than power. He carried presence. In an age of noise, he taught silence. In a time of division, he lived compassion. In a world obsessed with status, he chose the path of a servant. As his journey on earth nears its final chapter, many ask what he will leave behind. But perhaps the more important question is this: what has he already planted inside us? This is not a tribute, this is a mirror. Because in the life of Pope Francis, we see a reflection of the gospel most of us long to live. Not perfectly, but purely. Not with control, but with love. Not from fear, but from the kind of hope that makes people whole. So before he returns to God, let us remember the lessons he quietly etched into the world. Lessons not written on stone, but on hearts. Lessons that now belong to you. Pope Francis, humility doesn't make you smaller, it makes you greater in heaven's eyes. In a world that celebrates ambition, self-promotion, and public recognition, where social media turns life into image and success, is measured by applause, titles, and status, watching a pope reject splendor in favor of simplicity feels almost like a contradiction. But it is this very contradiction that has made the world stop and re-examine what greatness truly means. Pope Francis didn't step into the papacy like a conqueror, he stepped in like a servant. From the very beginning, he chose to wear the white robe without golden embroidery, to keep his wooden cross instead of a golden one, to ride in a small car rather than the papal limousine, and to reside in a modest room instead of the Vatican's grand papal apartments. In a society where power often hides behind distance and prestige, he drew closer by becoming smaller. And in that reversal, he became one of the most spiritually influential figures of our time. Humility is not weakness. It is the quiet strength of those who know who they belong to. Those who rely on human power need external validation to feel worthy. They require position, applause, and recognition to feel big. But those who know they are children of God don't need to compete. They don't need to prove. They don't need to shout. They simply know, and they live from that knowing. Pope Francis doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't have to speak the loudest or shine the brightest. He doesn't need the spotlight because he chooses to let Christ shine through him. And in stepping back, he somehow commands more attention than any display of grandeur ever could. A politician may lead a nation, but a humble soul who walks into the world, bearing only the fragrance of Christ's love, can shift nations of hearts. When Pope Francis knelt to wash the feet of refugees, Muslims, immigrants, and prisoners, he wasn't performing a ritual. He was shattering centuries of religious distance, restoring the image of a leader in the likeness of Jesus, the one who stoops low to lift others up. Today's world doesn't lack moral opinions. It lacks people who quietly live what they preach. There is an undeniable power in someone who isn't trying to be powerful. In a world obsessed with noise, the silence of the humble becomes a roar. We've been taught that success means being first, rising high, and being known. But Pope Francis challenges us to ask the deeper question: is your success recognized by the world or by heaven? God has never been obsessed with earthly thrones. He was born in a stable, walked dusty roads, and died on a cross between criminals. And Pope Francis knows this. When he visits the poor, eats with the homeless, sits with the forgotten, he's not doing charity. He's reminding the world where Christ truly lives. And so the lesson for you and me becomes clear. If you really want to encounter Christ, Go where the world refuses to look, because that's exactly where he is. Humility also means being unafraid to admit imperfection. In the religious world, where appearances are often mistaken for holiness, Francis chooses honesty. He openly admits the Church has made mistakes. He asks forgiveness for past silences. He listens to the young, the marginalized, the wounded. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers. And in doing so, he earns trust, not through authority, but through authenticity. A pope who says, "Without God's mercy, I am nothing," is a man who doesn't need political power because he carries spiritual weight that cannot be bought or manufactured. So what does this mean for us, ordinary believers in the everyday? It means that holiness isn't found in being loud, impressive, or perfect. It means we don't need to be on a stage to be significant. It means that to live small and real is more powerful than living large and fake. You don't have to speak 100 Bible verses. You don't have to lead a movement. You just have to show up, be present, and choose humility in the moment no one sees. Forgive when you could take revenge. Listen when you could talk over. Serve when no one's watching. And love when there's nothing in it for you. That's how you become great in heaven's eyes. Humility doesn't make you less. It makes you more like Jesus. You don't need a title to shine. The light in you already speaks. You don't need to win. Your quiet love is the victory. You don't need a throne. God has already written your name in heaven. And if you want to begin today, start small. Pray, bend your pride, forgive someone, and love deeply without asking for anything in return. Just like Pope Francis, just like Jesus, just like someone who truly belongs to God. Pope Francis, don't forget those on the margins. That's where Christ still walks. One of the most consistent and profound messages of Pope Francis's life and ministry is simple, yet often forgotten. Christ lives among those the world ignores. In a church often surrounded by grandeur, marble pillars and golden vestments, Pope Francis reminds us, not with words but with his feet, that the real altar is often found among the broken. The gospel doesn't exist for the privileged. It exists for the poor, the forgotten, the voiceless. And no one in our time has embodied that more clearly than this quiet, stubborn, radically merciful Pope from Argentina. When he visits refugee camps, when he hugs HIV patients, when he dines with the homeless or washes the feet of prisoners, he isn't doing PR. He's not ticking boxes for humanitarian credit. He's living a gospel that gets dirty, one that touches wounds, one that walks into places that smell of pain and looks them in the eye, not with pity, but with reverence, because that's what Jesus did. The gospel has never been a clean, comfortable doctrine. It's always been messy, disruptive, and dangerously full of love. Pope Francis understands this and lives it. For him, the Church is not a fortress to protect the holy from the unholy. It is a field hospital, wide open to the wounded, the outcast, and the sinner. His message to the world is clear. The Church does not belong to the righteous, it belongs to the broken, and that should shift something in us, because too often we measure our spiritual lives by how holy we look, how well we behave, how tightly we cling to doctrine. But Pope Francis reminds us, God is not found in perfection, he is found in proximity to pain. So the question for us is not, how holy do I appear? It's, who am I willing to sit with, to touch, to love, even when the world tells me not to? Francis doesn't just speak this truth, he walks it. He's walked into prisons where hardened criminals wept in his presence. He's walked into shelters where refugees finally felt seen. He's entered hospitals, homes, ghettos, war zones, and quietly whispered with his feet, You are not forgotten. God is still here. This is not about politics. It's not about social justice slogans. It's about the heart of Christ. And for Pope Francis, if Christ is not present in our response to the poor, then Christ is not present at all. He once said, "The things we say must be said with deeds. The faith we proclaim must be lived in mercy." For us, this means something radical. It means that your faith is not measured by how often you attend church, how well you know Scripture, or how clean your theology is. It's measured by how far you're willing to go for someone who can't pay you back. It's measured in who you visit when no one is watching. It's measured in how you treat the addict, the immigrant, the single mother, the mentally ill. It's measured in whether you see them as projects to be fixed or sacred beings to be loved. Pope Francis never set out to save the poor. He simply walks with them. He sees them. He touches them. And that act alone becomes healing. He reminds us that we don't need to fix everything to be Christ-like. We only need to show up. God never needed you to be important. He just needed you to be available. The world tells you to rise up. The gospel asks you to bend down. The world says protect yourself. Jesus says pour yourself out. Pope Francis has bent his knees before prostitutes, refugees, prisoners, the elderly, the forgotten, not because he wanted to make a statement, but because he truly believes this is where Jesus kneels too. And you, friend, are invited into that posture. So don't forget the margins. Don't avoid the mess. Don't hide from the pain. If your heart is too clean for the broken, then you haven't yet met the Christ who was born in a stable, walked with sinners, and died among thieves. To follow Pope Francis's example is to say, I won't be afraid of the hard places. I won't avoid the uncomfortable people. I won't close my heart to the world's wounds, because my Savior didn't. So today, start small. Send a message to someone you know is lonely. Stop and talk to the person you normally walk past. Sit with someone who makes you uncomfortable, and listen. You don't need a collar to be compassionate. You don't need a title to carry mercy. You don't need permission to show up and love. That's what Francis has done. That's what Jesus still does. And now, that's what you're being called to do too. Pope Francis, love is greater than rules, mercy above doctrine. If a person is gay and is seeking God with a sincere heart, who am I to judge? With those 11 words, Pope Francis shook the world. But more than that, he revealed the heart of a leader who had the courage to place mercy above mechanism and love above law. In a church long known for rigid boundaries and sharp doctrine, Francis reminded the world that the gospel was never about perfection. It was always about presence, always about people. He never set out to erase theology. He honors it, but he refuses to weaponize it. Because he understands something deeply sacred. Rules don't save people. Love does. We live in a time where religious performance can be polished, but hearts remain closed. We memorize verses but struggle to look a stranger in the eye. We defend dogma but ignore the man on the street. We talk about morality but are afraid to sit with someone who doesn't look like us, think like us, or love like us. Pope Francis sees through that. He doesn't reject doctrine, but he recenters it. And what he centers it around is the mercy of Christ. Because the Jesus of the Gospels didn't draw lines to keep people out. He crossed them to bring people in. He didn't shout down sinners. He sat with them. He didn't tighten the rules. He widened the table. Francis lives this, not just preaches it. To the divorced and remarried, he extends compassion. To LGBTQ individuals, he offers dignity. To women in pain, to doubters, to the fallen, he doesn't send them away. He draws them close, and he listens, because he knows this truth. People don't need to be corrected before they feel loved. They need to be seen, to be held, to be heard. He once said, "The thing the church needs most today is the ability to heal wounds and to warm the hearts of the faithful." I see the church as a field hospital after battle. This isn't softness. This is strength. Because it takes strength to hold space for people who've been hurt by the church. It takes courage to admit that religion has sometimes wounded more than it's healed. It takes humility to say, "I don't have all the answers, but I will not walk away from your pain." In a world quick to cancel and slow to forgive, Francis teaches us that grace isn't earned. It's given, and when it's given freely, it changes people more deeply than any rule ever could. So what about us? What would happen if we stopped leading with law and started leading with love? What if our first question wasn't, "What does the rule say?" but, "What does mercy look like here?" What if we trusted that love doesn't compromise truth, it completes it? Because truth without love is cold, and love without truth is shallow. But when love leads, truth becomes healing. Doctrine becomes a doorway, and the church becomes home. The gospel is not a checklist, it's an invitation to love when it's not convenient, to forgive when it's not deserved, to walk with people we don't understand, to show mercy when justice demands blood. That doesn't mean we abandon holiness. It means we let holiness look like Jesus. And Jesus never chose the crowd over the one, never chose rules over relationship, never chose control over compassion. So today, let Pope Francis' life remind you, you don't need to have the perfect answer. You don't need to solve every problem. You don't need to be the judge. You just need to show up with a heart that beats for mercy, to lead with warmth, to love without labels, to live the kind of grace that leaves people better than you found them. Because in the end, that's not just church, that's Christ. Pope Francis, true faith is found in small choices made every day. You don't need to wear robes. You don't need to hold a microphone. You don't need a title to be holy. Pope Francis reminds us of this with every quiet step he takes. In a world obsessed with grand gestures and dramatic transformations, Francis shows us something different, something quieter, deeper, and far more difficult. True faith is not loud, it's faithful, and faithfulness isn't proven in the spotlight. It's forged in the shadows, in the ordinary moments, in the daily decisions, in the silent battles no one claps for. Every day you are invited to choose holiness, not with fanfare but with intention. When you choose to listen instead of interrupt, that's faith. When you choose to forgive when no one apologizes, that's grace. When you wake up again to pray, even when you feel nothing, that's obedience. When you stay kind in the face of misunderstanding, that's maturity. These aren't Instagram-worthy moments. They won't trend. But in heaven's economy, they are the gold of sainthood. And Pope Francis, he gets that. He lives that. He doesn't preach a faith that only lives on Sunday or on a pulpit. He reminds us that the real gospel happens in the space between reaction and response, between judgment and mercy, between comfort and calling. He once said, "Holiness is not about performing extraordinary things, but doing ordinary things with love and faith." This is the kind of holiness that breaks chains, not the kind that seeks applause, the kind that doesn't need to be seen because it knows God sees it all. Pope Francis has washed feet, held the hands of the dying, stood in silence with the grieving, and smiled at people who have spit at the church, not because it's a performance, but because it's a way of being. Holiness, in his example, isn't separate from life. It's woven into it. It's how you respond to the cashier who's rude. It's how you drive when you're frustrated. It's what you say about others when they're not in the room. It's how you treat your family after a long day. These are the real altars. These are the real offerings. And every time you choose patience, integrity, compassion, and prayer, you are worshipping. Not with songs or incense, but with your life. The church needs this kind of holiness. The world needs it. Not just pastors, not just priests, but you, the tired parent who wakes up early to make breakfast. You, the student who chooses honesty in a culture of shortcuts. You, the quiet intercessor who prays behind the scenes. You, the caregiver who shows up day after day without recognition. Pope Francis sees you, and more importantly, God sees you. He reminds us that sainthood isn't for the perfect, it's for the persistent. You don't need to change the world. You just need to show up to your world with love. Love in how you speak, love in how you pause, love in how you keep choosing goodness, even when no one is watching. Because that's the kind of faith that makes heaven lean in. So today, let this be your call. Don't wait for a stage. Don't wait for the big break. Don't wait until you feel holy. Start now. Start small. Start with what's in your hand. And like Pope Francis, let your faith be found in the ordinary, because with God, nothing done in love is ever small. Pope Francis, be a person of hope, not of fear. In a world gripped by anxiety, division, and noise, Pope Francis continues to choose a posture that many have abandoned: hope. Not shallow optimism, not naive cheerfulness, but a deep, grounded, soul-rooted belief that God is not done, that love still wins, that light still breaks through the darkest nights, that what is broken can still be made whole, and what is dead can still rise. He doesn't deny the pain. He walks through it. He doesn't ignore the injustice. He speaks into it. He doesn't pretend the world is fine, but he reminds us that the world is not forsaken. Francis does not lead by fear. He leads by faith. While others may scream warnings of wrath and judgment, he whispers of mercy. While others build walls of defense, he opens doors of dialogue. While others preach punishment, he offers presence. And in doing so, he models the posture of Christ, the God who did not come to condemn, but to restore. In his words and in his walk, Francis reminds us, the people of God should be the first to hope, not the first to panic, because hope is not a feeling. Hope is a choice, a holy defiance, a way of standing. To be a person of hope is not to close your eyes to suffering. It's to open your heart to redemption. It's to say, yes, it's dark, but my light is not going out. Yes, it's hard, but I will not stop showing up with love. Yes, the storm is real, but so is the anchor. Pope Francis once said, "Let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of hope," because he knows the enemy doesn't need to destroy you to defeat you. He just needs to make you hopeless. And when you lose hope, you stop loving, you stop forgiving, you stop moving, and that's how fear wins. But Francis has chosen another way and invites you into it. It's the way of those who build, even when the world is burning, who speak peace, even when they're surrounded by conflict, who create beauty, even when all seems lost, who keep praying, even when the answers don't come. It's the way of Christ, who stepped into a broken world not with fear, but with hope wrapped in flesh. So what does this look like for you today? It might look like choosing to believe the best in someone who hurt you. It might mean getting up one more time when life has knocked you down. It might be continuing to pray for your family, your city, your heart, even when the breakthrough hasn't come yet. It might simply mean choosing to smile again, love again, trust again. Not because it's easy, but because hope isn't about ease, it's about endurance. Hope does not shout, but it does not back down. It stays, it stands, it plants seeds, it waters dreams, it builds bridges when walls are easier. It shows up when others walk away. It blesses when it could curse. It sings when the world goes silent. And Pope Francis is a living reminder that hope isn't just an idea, it's a way of life. So today, don't let fear make your choices. Let hope write your next step. And remember, you don't need to have all the answers to carry light. You don't need to fix the world to believe in its redemption. You just need to keep choosing God and keep choosing hope. Because where there is hope, there is God's breath still moving, and that breath is enough to raise nations, and it is enough to raise you. Pope Francis, final reflections, the legacy he leaves behind before he returns to God. As the world watches Pope Francis grow older, with a heart that has served long and deep, the question begins to rise. Not with fear, but with reverence. What will he leave behind when he goes to meet the Lord? And the answer is not measured in cathedrals, documents, or declarations. It's measured in something far more eternal, a spirit that changed the way the world sees God and the way the Church sees the world. Francis will not be remembered for power. He will be remembered for presence, not for perfection, but for proximity. Not for how high he stood, but for how low he knelt. He has shown us that the greatest leaders are the greatest servants, and that the most powerful sermons are the ones lived quietly, without applause. He reminded us that the Church is not a museum for the righteous, but a hospital for the broken. He reopened doors many thought were forever closed. He chose mercy over mechanics, compassion over control, and love over legalism. He taught us that theology without tenderness becomes noise, and doctrine without dignity becomes a weapon. And most importantly, he reminded us that God is not far away. He's with the poor. He's with the outcast. He's with you when no one else sees your pain. So now, it's no longer about what Pope Francis has done. It's about what we will do with what he's given us. You don't need to become a pope. You don't need a title. You don't need a stage. You just need to start here. Forgive that person. Hold space for someone different from you. Love someone who doesn't deserve it. Pray, not just to be heard, but to listen. Serve without posting about it. Choose humility when your ego wants revenge. These are not just spiritual practices. They are the echoes of his life. Because Pope Francis has shown us what holiness looks like in flesh and blood. It looks like simplicity. It looks like listening. It looks like walking into places others avoid. It looks like being misunderstood and still choosing love. It looked like staying soft in a hard world. It looks like letting God be enough, even when the world demands more. And one day, when he finally returns to God, it won't be the titles he held or the crowds he drew that will follow him into eternity. It will be the lives he touched, the wounds he helped heal, the mercy he poured out, without asking for anything in return. That is his true legacy. So what about you? What legacy are you building, not in name but in spirit? Will you be the one who carries the light further? Will you become the person of humility, of mercy, of hope that your world is waiting to meet? The time is now, the path is open, and Pope Francis has already shown us the way. You just have to take the next step, not with fear, but with love.